folder structure and program flow for a React application. So I will head back to my Visual Studio Code Editor, which has the code that we have browsed and opened. So if you want to open the code, then you can also do it by open folder and choose the folder which has your source code. For now, my project is in fundamentals folder. So let's look at the files that we have. So the readme file is just an instruction file. Then we have package JSON and package lock. This package JSON and package lock are created if you use npm as your package manager. There are other package manager tools like Yarn, Y-A-R-N. If you use Yarn, then you will have Yarn and Yarn lock file. But both does the same job. Their job is to get all your dependencies that are listed here from the node registry. So there is an npm registry on the internet. From there, it will go and fetch all the dependencies that's mentioned here. That's the job of npm and Yarn. And these files give the version of every dependency. Like in React, we are using the latest React version, which is 17. We are using React DOM. And then there's something else also it contains, this file contains. It contains the scripts. Scripts are the commands that we use. So we have been running npm run start, which means start means do this. It's actually executing this script, which is nothing but React scripts, which is coming inbuilt with React and then start. Similarly, if we write npm run build, it will run this. So we can write our custom scripts here if we want. For running the unit test, it's npm run test, which means React scripts test. So this was about package JSON and package lock JSON. So then we have git ignore file, which tells what should not be committed to Git or GitHub. After that, we have the node underscore modules. So whatever dependencies that got downloaded as a part of package JSON from the npm registry gets downloaded here in the node underscore modules folder. So this is the place from where it gets downloaded. So there is a global registry from where all the dependencies gets downloaded, which we mentioned here. So this is called npmjs.com. Here you can search for any package. If I search for React, search, it's going to get me all the React related packages. So here is the React. So I can install this by saying npm install React. So I can go ahead and install all the dependency one by one by saying npm I or npm install and then the package name. Or I can just go to the package JSON and add my dependency and its version like this inside the dependencies tag, and then run a command npm install at the project level, wherever at the level where the package JSON exists. Then it's going to combinedly download all of these from the node npm registry npmjs.com, which is nothing but the npm registry for all the dependencies. And once it has downloaded, it's going to keep all this inside this node underscore module folder. And we don't commit this folder because we don't need this big folder to be committed with our code. Hence, in the git ignore, we mention ignore node underscore modules, because this is already available on the internet in the npm registry. So whoever takes my project will not have this. So whenever you check out the project from GitHub, you have to at the root level run a command called npm install, and then it's going to download all these dependencies and store them in node underscore module folder. After that, only your application will successfully build. So next folder is public. So this is our folder where we have a fav icon, which is just an icon, nothing to worry about that. Then we have some logos, we can ignore that. We have a manifest JSON file, and this is needed for the progressive web apps. We are not going to talk about it, but if you want to make your application like PWA or Progressive Web Apps, this is the file that's needed. Only file that we are concerned here is index.html, and this is the only file that we have. This is the only HTML file that we have in our whole React application, and that is why it's also called single page application, because this is the only page that we have, single page. And this file we don't touch, we don't modify this file. Maybe we can add some things in the head tag of this file, but we don't ever touch the body part of it. So let's say I can mention here as React fundamentals. Maybe I will add some links or CSS or Google Fonts here, but apart from that we don't do anything to this. And in the body also it doesn't have anything, just a div tag with an ID of root. And this is very important because this is the place, this is the playground for React. So whatever we create in React as React components, they will be replaced here inside this div tag on the fly without page refresh. That's why it's called single page application, because on the fly only this div tag gets replaced by different components of React without page being reloaded or refreshed. We are going to look at how React does this, but this is the file that we have in the public folder. Moving on to source folder, this is the most important folder where we will spend most of our time doing development. So it has components. So by default, React creates the first component for us, which is nothing but app.js. So every component has two things, app.js or app.jsx. You can give any extension, you can give JSX or JS, anything is fine. And it may or may not have a CSS file. If you want to write CSS, you can have any CSS file name, and you can include that CSS in your component, like import and then add it here. And inside the app.js, we have a component called app, which has certain HTML markup, more specifically the JSX markup, which is writing HTML inside JavaScript function, and then it should be wrapped with a root. Here you see there is a root. Either you can use div or you can use any other tag or just use React fragment. Just opening bracket, closing bracket, and here also closing tag of that React fragment. But this is the most important component because this is the component that loads first, and we modified hello world and you saw this getting reflected on our page. If I put a new line here, see, it complains you have to close everything. So we have to close this because it's following JSX, which means it will follow XML namespacing or XML syntax, which means any tag which is open should be closed. So if we go here now, we will see hello world comes first, and then in a new line we get this. So if I get rid of this piece of code, then it's gone. It will automatically reflect, which means what is happening is it is taking whatever we have written in this app.js and it's loading inside the div root of index.html. And how is it doing that? So that's the interesting part. We will see that as well. Next is we have a file called app.test.js. Here we can write test for all our code that we are writing in the component. After that we have an important file called index.js, and this is the most vital file because this is the file where React DOM, which is the virtual DOM, picks up the main app component and puts it inside a element with the ID root. That's what we saw in the index.html. We have this element with a div element with the ID of root. So index.js takes up the app component, which is nothing but this what we have written, and takes a code of this app component and replaces it inside this div. And it does it every time whenever we do any change. And this is the reason why it is important that React does not use the actual DOM, rather it uses the React DOM, which is a virtual DOM, and it modifies the virtual DOM and then this React DOM is going to modify the actual DOM, and hence we will see the result here on the browser. So this is why it's important. So how does the flow works? First, the index.html gets loaded, and then it loads this index.js file. Index.js files renders, looks for the app.js component, which is imported here, and from the app.js component, it takes the app.js component and passes it inside the index.html root ID element, and in whatever is written inside the index, inside the app.js file, gets like this copied, Control X, and it gets pasted inside this div. You can assume that like this, but it does it on the fly. Literally, it does it on the fly. We don't even see it happening. That's why we don't see a page refresh. Which means if I remove everything from here, it's gone. It's going to instantly take that whatever is left and going to update it in our index.html, and we will see the desired output. So if I refresh, you see it's just this. So this was about the source folder app CSS. So you can create different components, and every component can have a JS file, a CSS file, and a test file. It's not mandatory to have a CSS file or test file, but it should have an app.js or JSX file where you write the code for what the component should do. Next is we have an index CSS file. So if you want to write CSS that should be common to all the components, or it should impact the body part, you can write it here. Logo.svg is just an SVG file, you can ignore it, and these files you can ignore. They are just used